Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our committee of the whole this morning, Mayor and Council and Administration. And people online, we have nobody in the gallery this morning. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 9:30. Is there any additions to the agenda? Councillor Wilson.
My apologies for the delay. I like to add a in-camera item in the
10.1.
10.1, a FOIP. Item.
Thank you for that. And that's your motion to the addition to the agenda.
Yes, please, thank you.
All in favor? Now motion to approve the updated agenda, Councillor Hall, all those in favor? Approval of the agenda is done. November 26th budget, our budget meeting minutes that were approved on December 3rd. Business arising, although we do have the 25-27 operating budget below. Should we wait till then, or does anybody want to talk to it in minutes? No? Okay. We have no delegations in the gallery this morning. Mr. Given, do we have any correspondence?
None that the administration is aware of.
Thank you. And we're on to new business. 25-27 operating budget. Mr. Given.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MD, Council, Director Malinchuk is here. She can certainly speak to the details, but the high level summary is that based on the feedback provided from Council at last meeting, a number of revisions have been made to the budget, including the removal of a number of items. The revisions bring down the proposed 2025 property tax increase to 4.9%. Director Malinchuk can provide any other detail, but this is really at the direction of Council. I think there was the consideration of some additional enhancements of positions beyond the base case that was provided by administration. Council, I think, seeing them in context and considering the sort of financial position of the community, asked to have those subsequently removed. The budget that's proposed in front of you is reflective of that removal. And I think administration is happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions for Mr. Given or Director Malinchuk? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MD. Thank you to Director Malinchuk. Just on the basics of the overall summary sheet, page 11, I think, on the budget document. I think it's page 16 of our electronic agenda. So I detected just 4 changes on that page. I just want to confirm that I'm reading it right. So revenue for administration has gone up $60,000. That's the stabilization reserve that's been brought in there. And then for operations, the expenses have gone down about 91 or 92,000. And collectively, that change is the far right number under net difference. It's down from 706 to 553. So that's the total of that 152,000 roughly. And then the utility budget has reduced by $16,000 or $17,000. So, and with all of those changes, we're left with a net tax increase, as I calculated, rate at about 4.9%. Correct?
Yes, Your Worship, that's completely correct. Good summary. couldn't say it better than myself.
Right. And then that then follows the direction that Council gave last week to adjust the budget with positions and incorporating additional revenue from the rate stabilization.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions for Mr. Malinchuk? Mr. Given? Councillor Malinchuk?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, I'm going to go to page 31 of the budget document. And I'll find that page here in our agenda. And I just want to review the utility distribution. And understand our process and are we continuing with the current charges that we are levying to increase the capital in both water and sanitation to continue to build our reserves?
Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Melnick, yes, that is, we're following through with the same procedure as we've done in the past few years. As you can see that there's the water and Sani levy increase that are a little bit higher, well, higher than your garbage and recycling. But they follow the same model that we've implemented, I believe it was 4 years ago now.
Thank you, and we've been able to use those funds during the past 2 or 3 years as required at the plant to do various repairs and so on because we have them available. So it would be prudent for us to continue along this path and with the provincial, I don't know if I'm gonna get the fund right. There are 2 different funds. There's a provincial stabilization fund, or would the other fund to help us with revenues that we won't be receiving, that'll help us to make up the difference for properties that are not in existence right now.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Melnick. So we have been putting away capital, taking as we've needed. I've said in other meetings where we're in a place where we've increased our capital commitments, but because of where we were in our asset retiring place, we had to start implementing more expenses in those areas. So once the wastewater treatment plant especially is caught up and brought to a good place, because it was 21 years when we started doing the additional renovations to that area. Once we get past all of those bigger expenses, then yes, we'll be putting away and planning for the future rather than drawing from those reserves as much. So hopefully we won't be pulling from them as much, and then it'll set us up for the future. And then we'll probably be due for another asset review by the time we get through this. It's been since 2015, which doesn't seem too long ago, but it was. So yes.
Additionally, Deputy Mayor Keller, for Councillor Melnick, the utility levies was included in the municipality's request for financial stabilization to the government of Alberta. So we recognize that we will not have the same number of utility customers in 2025 as we had in 2024. And so we did make a calculation on that. We expect to lose approximately 30% of our utility revenue. And so that it has formed a part of the request to the government of Alberta for financial stabilization.
Okay. And if I might just continue with, we have an opportunity where we have to work on the lagoon. And if I remember right in the capital portion of the documents here, that some of the money will come from our reserves plus grants to be able to complete the repairs to the lagoon that are required by provincial legislation.
Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Melnick, yes. So right now it's mostly sitting at it's sitting as unfunded. It will depend on grants, and it would also have to incur some debt, as we're not in a place to be able to fund that from reserves as of now. So, and I believe that Mr. Given has more to add to that.
Deputy Mayor Keller. Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, and Councillor Melvin, the capital plan, just in the sewer side, shows nearly $7 million in capital projects in 2025 and 2026. Also, you can see in the document, and that's a very quick, I'll try to maybe able to find a specific number on that, but you can see in the budget document, page 39 of your agenda package, or page 34 of the budget document, you can see our reserve projections. You can see that our utility capital reserve is expected to be at just $4.2 million at the end of 2025. So nearly $7 million in projects, only $4 million in reserves to be able to pay for these projects. So certainly the municipality needs to see grant funding from upper orders of government to be able to do those very large projects. Specifically the lagoon relining, as we discussed previously. If we're not successful in getting that grant, the municipality would have to either take on significant debt to fund that, because we don't have enough in our utility reserves to be able to fund that project. So this idea of building up reserves over time, I think, is a good choice by council. It has been admittedly a heavy lift, I think, for utility ratepayers, and you can start to see how even the amount that we've been able to save really isn't getting us to being able to fund our capital requirements without external supports.
Thank you both. I appreciate the explanations and relating that to our current request from both the government and from the residents.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. In the absence of questions from other councillors, I appreciate the opportunity. This is, I suppose, directed to Director Malinchuk, but CAO Given might also weigh in. Every budget document is based on some amount of anticipation of future events. So what are the assumptions underlying this budget with respect to the issue of the 10% of DRP and the additional revenue stabilization request that we have made? In other words, we have talked about the budget being conditional on some future events. So in what way are those two items reflected in the current budget?
Deputy Mayor Keller, for Mayor Island, and maybe I'll start, I'll check me supplement. So we'll start with the easier one of the two, that's more directly reflected. That's the municipal requirement for contribution to the DRP program, the 10%. Administration has represented that as a capital item in a future year, so an unfunded capital item. Because there's uncertainty about what the ultimate amount of the DRP requirement would be. The amount may increase if the program is extended and costs increase beyond sort of the 2-year time horizon that we've already sort of focused. Or they may decrease if there's some expenses aren't realized that we're predicting right now. So that number is uncertain, and so administration, for the purpose of budgeting, is recognized, I believe it's 10 million in 2027. 28. Thanks, Director Malchuk. So in 2028, we have a $10 million item with the expectation that we may have to pay 10% of $100 million. So that's acknowledged in our budget. It's unfunded, which means that at that time, the municipality would, essentially, as that bill comes due, the municipality would have to make a decision about how we pay for it. We could take on debt. Maybe there would be some source of outside funding. Maybe we'd use reserves. But the point is, we acknowledge that that's a cost in the future, but it doesn't have any direct impact in the 2025 year. If we wanted to start to save money to pay for that future bill, we would need to do a significant increase in property taxes in the 2025 year. Obviously, that isn't really a tenable solution given the financial situation of the community, and so administration hasn't chosen to build in collection of revenue to build a reserve to pay that future expense. On the other matter of financial stabilization request, the budget doesn't reflect that. The budget is based on the expenses that administration predicts will be required to operate the municipality. We take away expected known revenue, and at this time, DRP contributions, for example, are paying for a very significant number of positions in the budget, or essentially being paid for 90% through the provincial government, with no impact for tax base of 2025. So we understand that revenue. We don't yet have a clear picture of whether the province will provide the requested financial stabilization support. We've certainly heard public comments from the minister that imply that the government is inclined to do so. It's stated so in the legislature. We don't yet have a formal announcement. And so there is some uncertainty there, but I think it's a small amount of uncertainty. So the budget here is predicting that we will deliver the services that administration and council have decided the community needs in 2025, that we will collect the revenues required to do so. And I think the underlying expectation is that some of those revenues will come from outside sources. If they don't, that would be a discussion to have at mill rate setting time. So really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is when we get to saying, okay, the cost of operating the municipality as proposed in 2025, how will we share out that expense across all of the tax base? The request for financial stabilization would allow us to basically have the government of Alberta cover the bill for the destroyed properties, or the value that was lost as a result of the fire. If that didn't materialize, when it comes time to set the mill rate, we would see a shift in expense, the burden of carrying that expense as a result of the lost value. Essentially the structure, the value of the structures has been lost. That burden would shift to remaining structures. But again, that's at mill rate setting time and is somewhat independent of the sort of cost of operating the municipality. If at that time we didn't have an answer from the government of Alberta, administration could propose either service reductions for the latter part of the year, or additional funding strategies using reserves or other methods. But again, I think that's more a matter. There's a difference between what level of service should we provide to the community through this phase of recovery. That's the essential question that's in the budget now. Who should pay for that level of service and how should the cost of providing that service be apportioned across the community is a mill rate setting discussion. And again, based on public comments from the minister, administration has a high degree of confidence that Alberta is likely to provide the support to Jasper that they've provided in other situations like this. I hope that answers your question, Your Worship. I know that there's some level of uncertainty inherent in every budget. There's additional uncertainty in this budget. But the discussion about financial stabilization really is more likely a matter of the most important time around that will be around when we get to setting the mill rate and levying the property taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Given a really clear explanation for myself and I trust for council and for the public. So I appreciate that. With your permission, Deputy Mayor Keller, again, I'd like to go a little way through that door that's been opened by Mr. Given about setting the mill rate. I appreciate that it is not a budget question, it's a secondary question. We know that we will suffer assessment loss that's been generally calculated at about $300 million. That is loss of improvements on properties that have been destroyed. I have a couple of questions about that. Is that amount again, roughly 300 million, is that based on our own calculation, subtracting the improvement portion of assessments from destroyed properties, or is that at all based on insurance industry calculations of the amount of property loss?
Deputy Mayor Keller Happy, through to your worship. What we did initially is that we gave a list to our assessor, and he was able to give us a projected amount, and that's why you've heard this figure. It's based on our assessor's estimates at that point. And so far, we haven't heard any change in that as his preliminary assessment. So, and obviously that is, as you stated, the improvements on the land. So the land still has value, and it's something that's really important for, I think, Jasper's to know going forward, is that there is still a value attached to their land, and there is still going to be taxes associated with that portion of their land going forward. So I think just so that people know is really important.
Mr. Gibbon?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller. Just to supplement the response from Director Malinchuk, and to differentiate in the minds of the public and for council again, administration has identified the value of all the improvements, the buildings, the structures, as Director Malinchuk mentioned. That's the $300 million number. And again, that was from a rapid assessment earlier this spring, subject to being defined by our property tax assessor. But that $300 million number is not the same as the $880 million number that the Insurance Bureau of Canada has put out in the public. The $880 million is the loss that insurers believe that they're likely to incur. And that would account for things like, the losses for and expenses related to remediation of properties that were not destroyed. There are many Jasperites that have had significant cleanup costs around their properties that are remaining. Those would be counted in the $880 million. There are many Jasper businesses that have received support from their insurance companies that they were due, I should say, under business continuity or business interruption insurance. Those expenses and costs that insurers are paying to businesses to help keep them afloat and to recognize their lost revenue are in the $880 million. And so those are completely separate from any losses the municipality had. The impact of the disruption on business in the value of a business that remains, that is still standing going forward, is a bit of an unknown. The administration has made some estimate of that and included it in our request for financial stabilization. But I think the high point message would be that the municipality has accounted for the destruction of structures, and we've essentially discounted that off of our tax rolls in the expectation, actually, and with the knowledge that they won't be taxed in 2025. And so there was a building on it, they'll be taxed at the value of the land. That's the $300 million. The $880 million that may be out in the sort of public sphere was the amount that insurers expect to pay out, which would be for a whole bunch of different expenses that aren't related to properties or municipal sort of operations.
Thank you for that. And if I may, one final question, and then again, you've alluded to this, Mr. Gibbon, but for either you or Director Malinchuk, assessments for non-residential properties are largely income-based, and we know that non-residential properties, businesses in town will suffer significant losses this year. At what point will the 2024 income information be available to address assessments for the coming tax year? And will, I appreciate it's an unknown yet, but when will that income information be available to us to help inform decisions that we're going to have to make sometime in the spring about tax rates?
Deputy Mayor through to, your worship, thankfully, I've had some correspondence with our assessor recently, and, there are still requests for information that are out there, they're still trickling in. But he is actually expecting that he should have the majority of the information by the end of December. So he also suggested that it might be good to have an earlier meeting with council to go over everything this year so that we're well versed in what the situation is and maybe have time for additional meetings if we need to have that. So he's already suggested that he comes in way earlier in the year and we start going through all this information so that council and the public is aware to where we stand with assessed values.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Appreciate the indulgence of my colleagues.
I have a question, to you or Mr. Gibbon, Ms. Monchuk. So 6.5 million that we've applied for in 2024, that's to help us maintain what we lost this year. And then next year, we're applying for further money for stabilization, or is that part of the 6.5 million?
Mayor Keller, so the municipality has applied overall for just over approximately 15.5 million to the government of Alberta to be able to support municipal revenue loss between 2024 and 2027. So the 2024 number at roughly 6 million would that support again, which the minister I think is sort of implied is coming. It would enable the municipality to essentially waive property taxes on destroyed properties for the balance of the year. So essentially half of the year, say, in recognition of the destruction, and to be able to provide general tax relief to all taxpayers for the 1 month that the community was evacuated.
And just for the public, just for clear, and this is not subject to any part of that being paid back. This would just be straight grant. Am I correct?
The government of Alberta's financial support. So again, we don't have a formal announcement, so I can't speak to that.
Thank you. Other questions? Do you have a councillor willing to make a motion? Councillor Wilson?
I would be willing to make a motion that committee recommend council approve the 2025 to 2027 operating budget as presented.
Any discussion to make? All in favor? That is carried. And this will be back next week for council. Councillor Mullin?
Pardon me for not noticing earlier, but we've only approved the operating budget. And we need to add the capital budget and do a similar motion, although it's not on the agenda.
It's here in our motions.
That's not the agenda.
It's with the, again.
We don't have a point on the agenda, we approve the agenda. So it's nice to know that we need to also approve the capital budget, even though it's not formally on the agenda.
I was gonna ask for that next, so you make a motion. Councillor Mullin?
I might arm wrestle with the mayor, but we haven't had any discussion yet on the capital budget, so I'm gonna wait for a bit.
Questions on the capital budget? Councillor Mullin?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. The only question I would have is either for Director Malinchuk or CEO Given. Did the capital budget change with us getting to the 4.9% increase? Were there changes that were, without going line by line, are there things that we should identify what changed?
Deputy Mayor, through to Councillor Melnick, there was one correction that was made, note by utilities that was updated in, the water sewer area, and that was it, but it was just a slight reduction in the amount. So that was pulled out, and it ultimately affected, how it's also being funded. Otherwise, no, nothing has changed other than that one correction, and it didn't affect the 4.9. I'm calculating 4.9.
Thank you, appreciate that. I could arm wrestle the mayor. Since we're not doing any of the council games, I'm gonna make a motion that committee recommend council approve the 2025-2027 capital budget as presented with that slight change as noted by Director Melichuk.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mellon. Debate? Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And this will be back at our council meeting next week for approval. So everybody in the public has a week to weigh in if they have any questions or concerns. We're here to listen. Electricity supply procurement, I believe that's you, Mrs. Melanchuk.
Yes, thank you. So, we're coming today, for council to give direction to administration to procure electricity for the next term. Whether that be 1 year or 5 years, depending on how the bidding process goes through. What occurs is that, it goes out to APC. And then there's a live bidding time when, a decision has to be made very quickly. It's just how the market works for electricity and gas. So what we're seeing is that there will be a decrease in rates, which is great. So what we've presented in the budget will work going forward from what we've seen. Although remember that they change daily, hourly, minute by minute, so it's really hard to know for sure. But we're seeing so far that the rates have gone down from what we had secured last time. So we're just asking for that recommendation, the council direct administration to go to that procurement process. And that committee recommend administration sign the most appropriate contract in that timing. So it actually would be on December 16th that we'd be signing the best possible solution for the municipality going forward in the next 1 to 5 years. And then we would be able to come back at the December 17th, without an official report, but we'd be able to verbally update council on what we were able to secure going forward.
Thank you for that, Ms. Melanchuk. Questions for Ms. Melanchuk? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller. This signing of procuring energy is the price that we pay as a municipality. Has nothing to do with franchise fees and so on. So we have established with our suppliers for electricity or a supplier, a certain amount of franchise fee, which will continue on for the next whatever term. And I'm wondering, so how does this affect individuals, or does this affect individuals' electrical bills, or only the municipality electrical bills?
Deputy Mayor through Councillor Melnick, it actually is just the only way it would affect the public residents, whether it be commercial or residential, is on the budget. So it is the rates that the municipality is securing for our buildings, our street lights, and that's what we pay. And the resident would only see that impact if it went up drastically or comes down drastically within the budget. And ultimately it would come into a tax and utility rate adjustment. But thankfully, we're not seeing that big change this year. So otherwise, yes, it has nothing to do with actual residential or commercial properties themselves.
Thank you.
Councillor Hall. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MD. My question is this how we've always done this? I, for some reason, can't remember this happening in the last 3 years, but is this common practice?
Deputy Mayor through to Councillor Hall, yes, it is. It's different from other procurements for sure. Generally, we have more time, but we do see the initial documentation earlier, and then it just goes to a straight live bid, and that's why it's very competitive. And that's why we only have that short period of time when we come to council, generally beforehand, to say, this is what we need from council to sign this contract, that go ahead and do this, and then we come back with a report of what we were able to secure. Yeah.
Marilyn?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MD, through you to Director Malinchuk. I have 3 quick questions. The EAI administration fee, is that a fixed amount or a percentage? And I ask because right now it's included in the fee that we're paying, and it is roughly 3%. Based on the 1 year projected, which doesn't include the fee. I mean, if it goes down by half and it's a fixed fee, then the rate essentially doubles. So I'm curious whether it's a fixed percentage or a fixed amount.
Deputy Mayor through to your worship, it's actually, what I've seen in the past is it's a fixed fee. It's not that percentage based. And we have worked with them for several years, for sure 9 years during my term here, and before that as well.
Thank you for that. This whole thing is based on a live bid on one particular day, and I'm just surprised by the statement at the end of the discussion portion that suggests that is when the ideal wholesale market conditions arise. I'm just mystified by a process that comes down to live bidding on one particular day as the ideal way to do this. I mean, it might be where we're at, but can you explain how that is projected as the ideal way to get the best rate?
Yes, somewhat, Deputy Mayor through to your worship. It's basically, I can see how we might be able to change the wording on that, but it's that they, as EAI, come to us at a given time to go over, well, this is what we're seeing, this is what the market fluctuations are, what's happening in the market. We would suggest that now you start thinking about going into the procurement process. So that's what it means. It's not necessarily that day, it's just a good time overall that we're going in to look at this and secure our next contract.
Mr. Freeman?
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP. Your worship, I think this is also, it's important to recognize that Alberta is in a deregulated energy market. The cost per megawatt changes, as Director Malinchuk said, hourly in the Alberta market, actually even more than hourly, very, very frequently. And so the rate that any supplier is willing to give any customer on a contract basis, from this 1 to 5 years, will vary hour to hour. And so we want to go to the market, ask the marketplace, okay, at this time, and that's the bidding period, the live bidding period, what are the options that are available in the market? And so all the different energy providers will put forward their best prices. at that time, based on whatever market condition factors that they put in and what they predict the cost of supplying energy, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, will be how they make those predictions. If we want to talk about the uncertainty inherent in the municipal budget, I think there's a significant amount more uncertainty in trying to predict the cost of energy 3 years from now. But that's their business. And so we'll go to the market and get bids from a number of different suppliers. With the assistance of EAI, administration will assess which is the best value for the municipality in terms of the length of term and the rates that are available. And then we'll make our choice. And the reason that it is this very short live bid period is because they will, 2 hours after that, change their calculations on what it might cost to provide energy 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from now. And so they will only hold their pricing for a very short window of time. And that's where we have to execute the contract.
Thank you for that. And my final and simple question is the discussion portion of the document references this all happening on December 16th. But the second part of the recommendation suggests that it's going to be sometime today. So should that be December 16th if we make a recommendation? You see it says December 10th. I just want to be clear in case I'm the one that makes the motion.
Deputy Mayor, through to your worship, I'm looking at my calendar because there are 2 dates actually, and I'm wondering, it could be a typo, but I wanted to look. So there is a day where we go through the RFP process or contract or possibilities. And then the 16th is the day that the decision is made where you have the 15 minutes to make that secure the contract. So I believe that was definitely a typo on my part. I'm sorry. I just wanted to also say that on that live bid day, the 15 minutes, if EAI saw that things weren't good for the municipality, they would also recommend that we don't sign with anybody at that point. So we would go through the whole process again. So there is that possibility as well, that if things weren't looking as good as and as favorable as they thought, they would tell us to hold back and we'll go at it again at another point. So yes, I apologize. Good eye, and I believe that's a typo. Thank you.
I will make a motion that committee recommends council direct administration to procure electricity for the next term being anywhere between 1 and 5 years. And that committee that we direct the administration sign the most appropriate contract on December 16th, 2024, and provide a verbal report back to council at the December 17th, 2024 regular meeting.
Any debate? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. 7th Mastery Group or RRSP participation. Mr. Gibbon.
Deputy Mayor Keller MP, Brad Boyd, our acting human resources manager, is on Zoom, and he was going to handle this report.
Welcome, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. And yeah, I'm here to talk about the municipality of Jasper participating in a group RRSP. So I'm hoping that committee will recommend that council approve the MOJ who are the municipality of Jasper to participate in the group RRSP. Recently, the municipality has created 30 or so term positions, and administration is currently experiencing challenges in filling some of those positions, mostly due to a less than competitive total compensation package, as well as some housing challenges. To address, there is a primary inequity between term positions and continuous positions, and that's that the term positions are not currently eligible to participate in the local authority's pension plan. So to help overcome this part of the compensation package, we're looking for the municipality to participate in that group RRSP. The positions that we've created are largely due to recovery work. A lot of the positions that are new haven't been hired by the municipality before. Some of these are project managers, fire captains, financial coordinators, as well as outreach workers. And we're just looking at one strategy to attract talent and also retain them for as long as we need the recovery work to continue. So what administration is proposing is a 5% group RSP contribution for term employees that are not eligible for the local authority's pension plan. The group RSP is managed through AB Munis, who also manages their benefit plan as well. They have the lowest administration fees, and they do have a good rate of return. They also represent a number of municipalities throughout Alberta, so we would join in with that plan and have a larger support. And if we had any issues, we would work through AB Munis. So the administration of it is also simple. There's approximately 30 positions right now that would be eligible. Of those 30 positions, there's about 25 employees. The total projected cost right now is just under $92,000 per year. The cost is eligible for disaster recovery program funding. So the municipality would only be responsible for 10% of that, which is around $9,200 per year. And this can be absorbed into the 2025 budget. And now I will happily take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Questions for Mr. Lloyd? Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Remke. I'm sorry I came to this late. In my thought process, are any of these positions that could be affected positions in the JRCC?
Deputy Mayor Helen Keller through to Mayor Ireland. Yes, a number of the positions are in the JRCC, but they are municipal employees.
I apologize to council for not picking this up earlier, but I have to declare a conflict. I have a family member working for the JRCC that I hadn't initially anticipated was part of this, but obviously is. So I will absent myself from the rest of the discussion.
Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller-Remke. It's not specifically stated. Thank you very much for this report and understanding. Recruitment is difficult for our area and also other factors you mentioned, housing and so on, cost of living here and so on. We would be contributing as a municipality 5%. It's not stated specifically, but does the employee also contribute 5% of their wages?
Deputy Mayor Keller-Remke through to Councillor Melnick. At this time, it would just be a contribution on the municipality's part. It's not intended to be a matching program. A number of the employees that we have been hiring are taking pay decreases to come and support it just because they want to be part of the recovery. So for them to be able to maintain their current cost of living and lifestyle, they need to be able to have a higher net. So by contributing the 5% of the municipality's part, we're just trying to make it more appealing than if it was a matching program.
Just a quick follow-up question. Would Alberta Muni, would they be able to facilitate if an employee was in a situation where they could contribute a matching contribution within the program that's being proposed?
Deputy Keller-Remke through to Councillor Melnick. Yes, we actually have the ability as a municipality to create the program. So whether that is strictly a contribution by the municipality, or if we wanted to create a matching program, that is something that could be considered.
Mr. Boyd, our current employees that have taken positions with the recovery department, their current LAP program would still be in place, am I correct?
Deputy Mayor Keller-Empty, you are correct.
Yeah. So it's just anybody new in the term position that we're looking at for this contribution.
Or anybody that would be backfilling a continuous employee that's not eligible for LAPP. They would also be eligible for this group RSP as we're proposing.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Wexler.
I'm just interested in how many of the approximately 30 positions have not been filled?
Okay, Deputy Keller-Empty through to Councillor Wilson. I'd have to go check the actual tracking sheet. I believe we've filled approximately, I want to say around 20 of them, but we've also had a couple of resignations recently. So I would have to go get the accurate numbers to provide you, but I could do that.
No problem. This is the approximate 20. That's great. Thanks.
Councillor Wexler.
I just wanted to speak in favor of this. I think it's very important that we provide this support to the people who are wanting to work on our recovery. And I think as an employer, it's an important benefit to be providing. And I also wanted to ask if they are eligible for the other types of benefit plans at this point.
Mr. Boyd.
Deputy Mayor Keller-Empty through to sorry. As per the collective agreement, a lot of the term employees are not eligible for the municipality's benefit plan. There's certain requirements that have to be met. So some of these term positions would be eligible for benefits, but not all of them.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyd, where are we housing all these individuals? Are a lot of them in Jasper, or are they living in Hinton and commuting?
Deputy Mayor Keller-Empty. I can't speak to all the living conditions of these employees. I know that there are a number of them that are currently staying in hotels supplied by the municipality. I know that we do have some that are working remotely. Myself, I'm working hybrid, so I base out of Edmonton and I come to Jasper every once in a while. So it really depends on the employee's individual circumstances.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, if there's no further questions, I'd make a motion. The committee recommend council approve the municipality of Jasper's participation in a group RRSP through Alberta Munis.
Mr. Given.
Sorry, I just want to get in the queue for after council deals with the motion before we move on to the next item.
Any debate? We'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion is passed, and I'll be back in front of council next week. Mr. Given.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor Keller-Empty. While Mayor Ireland is coming back and taking his seat, I just wanted to, in front of council and the community, thank Mr. Boyd. He's come as a secondment from the city of Edmonton. His secondment term will be ending in the next couple of weeks here before the Christmas break. So he came in at a very pivotal time for the municipality to fill a gap in our HR capacity. Obviously dealing with a lot of new hires, a lot of unusual situations, and a really critical time for our employee team. Brad's done a really commendable job, and I want to thank him for his service to the municipality. And I also want to thank the city of Edmonton for enabling that support through their agreements to second Brad to the municipality through this time. So Brad, thank you very much, and council certainly would encourage you to pass on your thanks to Brad if you get a chance to speak to him.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks on behalf of all of us at council for helping us out, and I'm glad that you were able to get to Jasper, and we look forward to working with you till the end of your position here.
Thanks so much. I appreciate all of that.
I'm going to call a 5-minute break and we'll return at 10:30. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, we're a few minutes late back. I called the meeting back to order at 10:35. Next on our agenda, community and economic development commons applications. Mrs. Riddell, I'll hand it over to you.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor Keller MP and all council. In front of you, you've got the intake report for the Community and Economic Development Fund. The recommendation from administration is that committee recommend council direct administration to award funding to 4 of the 48 total applicants, recognizing the limitation is due to the budget, not due to the amazing ideas that came in. So the 4 that we're recommending to receive funding is the Friends of Jasper Childcare Society, the Jasper Filipino Canadian Society, individual in the community, Jessica Worth, and another individual, Jennifer Alway. And of course, council may choose to award funding to the Community and Economic Development Fund to any of the applicants, and they are all included as attachments to the report. Please note, administration did summarize the original applications with the aim to make it easier to look through all 48. However, administration is happy to produce any of those original applications if there's interest. Committee may also direct administration to return to a future committee with more information, of course. So, in summary, we received 48 applications from individual residents, business owners, and nonprofit organizations. Our team supported applicants with an in-person meeting, online information sessions, one-on-one support to anyone who needed it to navigate the process. And I want to say a huge thank you to Jenna McGrath, who did so much work on this intake. Call for proposals went out October 20th with a month of promotion per the administrative procedure. The deadline November 20th, and these are for projects that are January 1st to December 31st of 2025. The total funding we can award today is $10,000. And all of the applicants submitted complete applications that met the core criteria in the policy. Administration conducted an initial review. The applications were scored. The applications were tremendous, very creative, unique ideas that came in. All of the ideas were, going to boost the community or economic landscape in Jasper. Just out of interest sake, I do have a couple of fun statistics to share. Out of all the applications, 70% of applications were ideas around recreation. So that could include arts and cultural events or sports-based events. Another 15% were ideas for space improvements or supplies that would be communally available, really reflecting the community's interest in kind of that circular economy or that reuse type of priority. And then the remaining 16% of applications were around capacity building to address social issues. Some of those include issues like food insecurity, improved services for groups at risk of exclusion, childcare, things that would address financial instability or transportation. So one really neat spin-off benefit or insight that we felt from this process, because we received so many applications, is it was almost covert engagement, where we were able to hear from the community a snapshot of what they felt would really improve things in Jasper right now. It's really interesting. So we've summarized the 4 applications that we recommend for funding under the discussion section, and the remaining 44 applications that are not funded by council. We do have permission from the applicants to be able to share their really cool ideas with other potential funders and do our best to try and connect them with other funding opportunities. Community and Economic Development Fund has a lot of strategic relevance And as you can imagine, it was difficult for the team to really just pull out 4. And so I'll let you know in terms of our rationale, we tried to pull out the applications that were, the most aligned with council's strategic priorities. And then we looked at ones that were inclusive and also benefiting potentially a group at risk of exclusion. And or advancing some of council's strategic plans that they've adopted recently. So the resources to administer the fund are in the budget, and there's $10,000 that we can issue in the operating budget of 2025. I will do my best to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Riddell. Questions from Mrs. Riddell? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. I have a question, and you noted the scoring. Can you maybe get into a little bit, not deep detail, but when you use the criteria balancing the various scoring methods to be able to come up with these 4, and they all scored like literally within, they all scored at that point. So I'm sure the scoring was the number of these were all very close below this, and it just would be a benefit because there are other funding agencies potentially in the community that might be interested in supporting some of these initiatives, because there were a lot of really good initiatives that were submitted.
Mrs. Riddell.
Certainly, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP through to Councillor Melnick. That's a great question. To ensure inclusivity with the process, the scoring is quite clear. It's a certain number of points per answer. So you get 5 points if you answered this question, clearly and well. And so as you can imagine, the scoring doesn't give us the super detailed nuance. We do have to apply our other types of lenses, which is, does it align with council's priorities? Is it benefiting a group at risk of exclusion? How can we implement council's commitment to equitable policy and operations that allows every citizen to participate in community life? So the scores here are 35, 35, 35, 35. All of the applicants either scored 35 or 30. And the only ones that scored 30, again, that's a very high score. They might just not have had as much reach. So their project might not have benefited as many Jasperites, or it was just marginally less accessible than the others. All of the applicants were exceptional. The ideas were great. And so the scoring is really all very high.
Thank you.
Other questions from Mrs. Riddell? Councillor Maxson.
And the committee recommend council direct administration to award funding from the Community and Economic Development Fund to the 4 below applicants. The Friends of Jasper Child Care Society, 2,500. Jasper Filipino Canadian Society, 2,500. Jessica Worth, 2,500. And Jennifer Otway, 2,500.
Speak. Marilyn.
I just want to speak in support of the motion and as an opportunity to thank the department for the exceptional work and to include in our agenda material all of the applications. It's important, I think, that the community recognize that there are 48 different groups that have applied for funding. All of them are worthy, but we have limited funds, and the work that administration has done to get this to council, making some really difficult decisions, is so much appreciated. I can't do other than and to support the recommendation and offer my thanks to all of you who obviously expended an incredible amount of time and thought into coming up with this recommendation. Just use this opportunity to thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, for that. Unless we're done, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried.
Thank you.
Wildfire Community and Economic Recovery Fund Policy. Mrs. Rupert, sorry, Mr. Ola.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, Keller MP, Mayor Ireland, and Council, for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Following very closely from the previous conversation, I'm here today to present our Wildfire Community and Economic Recovery Fund policy proposal with the recommendation that committee recommend Council to adopt the Wildfire Community Economic Recovery Fund policy as presented. Alternatives, of course, that committee could recommend Council adopt the Wildfire Community Economic Recovery Fund with specific changes, or that can direct administration for return to a future committee of the whole meeting with more information. By way of background, back on October 15th, my colleague Elise Riddell came to Council to present the Community Economic Recovery Fund policy with some discussion of potential changes to expand or change somewhat the scope of that policy. And the recommendation from Council at that time was to develop, to leave the existing policy as it is and to bring back a specific wildfire recovery community economic development policy. That is what we're bringing to you today. So in your agenda package, you'll see the policy as drafted. The policy sets out high-level parameters under which the municipality may distribute funding from external funders through to local organizations. That is specifically important because of the established relationship with the Jasper Community Team Society and its requirements to distribute funding through the municipality. So this policy would provide a vehicle for that funding to flow through the municipality from the JCTS to various community groups to fund exactly the type of grant proposals that are listed in that list of 48 applications. So again, that would provide an opportunity to expand beyond the funding provided through the existing Community Economic Recovery Fund to a larger number of applicants. It also provides a mechanism for applications for grant funding from community groups to flow into the Jasper Wildfire Recovery Funders Table. The Funders Table is a group that has been convened by the JRCC that brings together funders, including the JCTS, the Banff Canmore Foundation, the Red Cross, and the United Way, to discuss applications for funding, opportunities to fund social and economic recovery-oriented programs and projects in the community, for funders to identify promising projects that align with such things as the strategic priorities of Council and the identified objectives of the Social Recovery Working Group, to identify the appropriate source of funding for such projects and to evaluate those in a collaborative manner. So this would allow, for example, applications such as those submitted to the Community Economic Recovery Fund to flow to that funders table and to be evaluated in that collaborative setting by various funders, which then could be funded directly by the Jasper Community Team Society or by other funders in that group. The policy aligns with several strategic priorities of Council, which you'll see in the agenda package. It relates to two relevant pieces of legislation, both the relationship with external groups policy, policy ECWA 4, and our equity, diversity, and inclusion policy, policy E115. There is no additional financial resources required to implement this policy. It will be implemented through the JRCC, the existing administrative resources. And the policy was developed with equity considerations that are embodied in that equity, diversity, and inclusion policy. As I mentioned, the draft policy is attached to the agenda package, and I am more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ola. Questions from Mr. Ola? Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, through you, Mr. Law. I am drawn to what I see as some wording difficulties with with the policy, and the suggestion it may believe that there are applicants to the Wildfire Community Economic Development Fund, that there is such a fund within the municipality. As I understand the proposal, it is that the municipality through this fund would be the conduit for funding from others. And when there is wording in the policy that speaks about applicants, it seems to lead to an inference that people can actually apply to this municipal entity for funding. And yet, as I understand, the intent is that external groups, Jasper Community Team Society, for example, will receive applications and make determinations as to who should be eligible. And then they will simply fund that through municipal sources. If the policy speaks about applicants, it certainly sounds like there's a direct connection between an applicant and the municipality for the funding. And it seems to avoid the reality that we are a conduit for external funding, not the source of the funding. And I can't tell you exactly how I would change it, but I would recommend that we disabuse the public from thinking that we are the source of funding and that you can make an application and we have some money. That is not my understanding of how it will work. I accept that ultimate recipients will have to be in alignment with our standards and our requirements. But that is information that should be given to external funders so that they are aware of that in advance. But I do hesitate to endorse the policy as it is written, because it seems to me to leave a suggestion that we are not merely a conduit of external funding. We are the source of funding and people can apply to us.
If I may,
Yes,
Mayor Florent, to Mayor Ireland, I think that's a perfectly apt observation. The policy as proposed establishes what I would say is a sort of a two-way conduit. It both establishes a process for receiving applications through an application page on the municipal website, and a process for flowing funds through the municipality to applicants. But you are absolutely right that there is no fund held by the municipality to fund these applications. And so if it is deemed that it is an important step to ensure the public that, or to disabuse the public of any notion that the municipality holds the funding, then I think that would be a worthwhile change to the policy. But yeah, it should be very clear that there is no municipal funding going toward any of these applicants, that this is really about facilitating an application process and facilitating the flow of funding from external funders through to community groups.
Mr. Gibbon?
Thanks very much, Dr. Mayor Keller. I agree. I think his worship hit on an important, sort of challenging point. We're trying to act as a facilitator here. The policy does, in a couple of points, I think an attempt to express sort of what the municipality is doing and not doing. Under standards 3.1, it says that the funding will be provided by external sources. So again, that's sort of explicit that any grants provided or funding provided under this will be ultimately open sources from external sources. That could maybe be made clear, more clear by saying that the WCERF awards funding provided by external sources with no municipal tax dollars being contributed, for example. That would be a little bit more explicit. Also, we could move from the responsibility section up into the standards section. There is a reference under the last bullet under section 6, Jasper Wildfire Recovery Funders Table. It says review applications to the fund. So perhaps we could move that portion or some sort of similar reference under standards. So it is a little bit more clear that, okay, under 3.1, the money is coming from external sources, not municipal property taxes. And perhaps a new 3.2 would say that decisions on the award of the funds are made by the funders table. So it's clear again that it's not, one, the money isn't coming from municipalities, it's coming from external sources, which could be a little bit clearer in 3.1. And two, that the decision on allocation of those dollars is being made by the funders table. So it might be, it's there, but it's kind of buried. Maybe we could highlight that in the standard section by just moving that item from responsibilities and adjusting it to include it under the standard section. I don't know if that would address the concern the mayor had raised. Appreciate that it's a complicated approach and administration trying to do the best to describe it. Maybe that would get to it.
If I might, so I thank you for that, and that 3.1 is one of the lines that I had highlighted, because I see an internal inconsistency where it says the WCERF awards funding provided by external sources. That sounds like we determine who the recipient will be with money provided to us by an external source, but in fact, I think the intent is that the external source awards the funding, and we channel it to the recipient, which is a different expression of where we want to go. And similarly, under 4.1, it says funding will be granted. It sounds like we are again granting the funding, when in fact we are channeling the funding granted by others. So if we could have better clarity on those points, I would be more comfortable whether or not council thinks I'm tilting that real windmills.
Mr. Roloff?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Clark, and through to Mayor Ireland. Maybe just as a bit more background, where we are in terms of the development of the relationship with various funders. The funders table was established relatively recently. We're having our third meeting as a group today, and we're still in the development of terms of reference with that group. So I might suggest that the development of those terms of reference might proceed in parallel with the refinement of this policy, such that it functions as needed for those funders to receive applications and to direct funding appropriately. And in doing that, we can address the clarity concerns around ensuring that the public and any applicants for funding recognize that the source of funding is in fact those external funders, and the municipality's role is one of facilitating the receiving of applications and the flow through of funding to those applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Roloff. Other questions?
It sounds like there's some feedback for administration, and certainly Doug has heard some. I have a couple of ideas, and so maybe a motion to refer the policy back to administration for revisions based on the discussion today. I think that motion would give us the flexibility to take what we've heard, adapt the policy, and refer it to the future committee.
We'll have Councillor Lovell make that motion. Mayor Ireland?
I will make that motion that committee direct administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting with revisions to the policy based on today's discussion. And speaking to the motion, I think that the final sentence of the discussion element in the request for decision sets out exactly what is intended, and I think that just has to be reflected. That is, it's a mechanism by which the Jasper Community Theme Society and other external funders can issue wildlife recovery related financial support to local organizations via the municipality of Jasper. That's what I hope to see reflected in a revised policy. I appreciate the work that's been done. Just think on this particular issue, clarity to the public is a critical component of all of this. Hence a motion for some revisions to the policy, draft policy.
Councillor Melnick?
Speaking to the motion, motion's not on the floor yet, is it? It is, okay. Just, for other clarity, one of the questions I had, which you answered during the discussion, was who the funding table was. And perhaps for clarity in this policy, we might want to cite examples of who that could be. It may change over time, but just so that people are aware of where the funding is coming from. And those sources probably don't have unlimited funding, and eventually will come to a point where there won't be available in the community anymore. That would be my only other observation, to include that for some additional clarity.
Other discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Just thank you, Mr. Owen, for your work, and look forward to return with this policy.
Thank you very much.
756 municipal elections 2025. Just given. Directing the law.
Deputy Mayor Keller MP, Director Nadon is here. We do have an item related to the 2025 municipal election. That is really a routine matter. We need to appoint a returning officer for the coming election. We're heading towards the end of this calendar year, and with the start of the next calendar year, people can actually start to submit their nomination forms. And so administration wants to ensure that we're sort of setting up that process, so nomination applications that might come in the early new year go to the right place. So the recommendation is that committee recommend council appoint Christine Don as returning officer, and committee recommend council appoint Emma Acorn as a substitute returning officer for this election. Again, a really routine matter. In the absence of a decision on this, the CAO, essentially under the Act, holds the position of returning officer until such time as council appoints another party. But administration is here to recommend today that Mr. Don and Ms. Acorn are the supervisors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor willing to make a motion? Councillor Hall?
I'm not going to take a motion quite yet. I just, while we're on the topic of election 2025, I know it's not in here, but curious what will happen with residents who aren't living in Jasper at that time, that are still out of town waiting for their homes to be built. Can they vote, and how can they vote if they can't get here? I sat in a seniors conversation last week, and there are seniors in Ontario that are living there until their homes are built, and they will be returning to Jasper during the term. And I know that the province has changed a little bit around counting ballots, and I just wonder how that might look for constituents who are not living in Jasper at the time.
Ms. Nadon?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP, through to Councillor Hall. The requirements are slightly different for candidates and for voters. The Act keeps changing from election to election, so technically you have to live in Jasper on election day to vote. You have to live in Jasper for the 6 months prior to the election to be a candidate. So given the situation due to the wildfire and that our residents are displaced, we do have to contact the province and ask for an exemption. I'm not sure how we could ascertain that people were indeed residents. If people were property owners, there's probably a leasehold aspect that we can look into. But if you're a tenant, how will we demonstrate that you were indeed a resident of Jasper, or continue to be, or want to be? So that's some work that we'll have to take up in January with the province. So we will need an exemption to the Act in some way, shape, or form.
Ms. Nadon? Mayor Ireland?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keller MP. Again, extraneous to the actual issue before us, but in view of the upcoming election, does the budget reflect the additional costs that we will incur for an election in 2025? And have we incorporated the extra costs of counting ballots, because the province has now declared that we cannot use machines for that purpose, even though we can get our money counted with a machine at the bank?
Deputy Mayor Keller MP, through to Mayor Ireland, by some luck, Jasper never used counting machines. We're small enough and we had enough changeover in the last few elections that we didn't change the process. We just stayed with a manual count, which was quite challenging during the last election because we also had a referendum question as well as a vote on a question. But we still managed to get results up in a timely fashion. So we're actually quite experienced with manual counts. And for a community our size, I don't foresee this will be such a challenge. And directly to your question about budget, yes, there's an allocation in the 2025 operating budget. So annually we put money aside in reserves. So we don't see a big hit on an election year. So it's a transfer from reserves, which you'll see as revenue and legislative services this year to conduct an election in the spring or in the fall, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Other questions? Motion? Councillor Benson?
So for the questions, I'd make the motion that committee recommend to council to appoint Christine Nadon as returning officer for the 2025 municipal election. And that committee recommend council appoint Emma Acorn as substitute returning officer for the 2025 municipal election.
Thank you. To date. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Thank you, Ms. Ladon. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I do have a question around our remuneration policy that I know is set to come back to us at some point. I'm just wondering if there's an idea of when we might see that while we're on election.
Deputy Mayor Keller, MP, for council. Also, certainly that's reflected in our motion action list. Director Nadon and I were just speaking about that. We had attempted to get it for this agenda, and so you'll see that it was recommended to be deferred to December. You'll hear us say during the motion action list discussion that that's actually pretty January. So, you know, we certainly wanted to be in a position where that information was known before the nomination period. There's no legal requirement for that, so we're certainly in compliance with legislation. And we'll be able to, you know, bring that to council for conclusion and then sort of finalization in the early new year.
And all around, no motion action. I'll hand over to you, Street.
Okay, then starting from the bottom of the motion action list and working our way up. The first change is that council remuneration review. You'll see in the agenda package the recommendation to be deferred to December. We're going to actually ask that that's to January. Going up to the traffic bylaw safety considerations, first administration would recommend the first sort of director from council of enforcement levels. That's been action that administration is using their sort of authority in terms of enforcement, and so I don't think that that needs to be reflected in the motion action list. The second part about returning with alternate service level approaches. Administration has put this forward to DRP. We are actioning that in terms of resourcing it. It has been supported that the municipality will receive financial support for additional service in the destroyed areas. The municipality will provide service to some of the public walking routes. We're working up a map so we can show council and the community what that looks like. Obviously, there's some areas that will not need to be cleaned at all, but we have support to resource up to enable us to undertake sort of priority cleaning, and we can bring more information to you in January. B109, internal fiscal controls and financial reporting policy, a draft is underway right now, and we can bring that to council in the early new year. Parcel CH access road, and so this is on the east end of town, some of the sites that are going to be interim housing. The municipality already planned to undertake work. The portion of that work is intended to be funded through a local improvement levy, where the ultimate owners of those lots or leaseholders on those lots would be responsible for contributions towards the servicing. Prior to the wildfire, that was intended to be Parks Canada and the RCMP. You know, with the adjustments, there's some discussion about how that might look for the period where those will be used as interim housing. Or if there is any long-term housing there, then obviously the owners of those leaseholders, of any lots there would be responsible for sharing some of these costs. So we're working through some of those adjustments and we see that coming in back in the new year. The moving traffic enforcement, subject to the approval of the budget, administration is recommending that this be deferred to February, and the skate park committee, obviously, administration is recommending that come back in the spring, closer to the completion of the project after the contractor is able to restart. We'll be able to give council and the committee a better final picture of the ultimate cost of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Questions from Mr. Gill on the motion action list? Councillor Wilson.
Just on the item of draft bylaw safety considerations and clearing the sidewalks, is there any public communication on like what route we are clearing sidewalks for winter travel, like bike travel or pedestrian travel? Is there like a constant one that we're clearing to say Stone Mountain or the kind of the areas to the west?
Deputy Mayor Keller, that's exactly the kind of information that the administration wants to bring forward. So first, the question was, would we get the financial support through DRP? The answer to that was yes. Now we need to resource up with equipment and staffing to be able to do that. The administration is in the process of doing that. And then the next would be to sort of bring that information to the public. So we haven't sort of launched that enhanced level of service yet. We're sort of building the resources to be able to do it. And in advance of the launch is when we would bring that information to the public and to council.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Kind of around this same conversation, but I know I brought this up a few months ago around the streetlights. If a streetlight is not on, does that mean it's just not working? There are still a few pretty dark areas in town, particularly where Councillor Wilson lives, that traffic circle. Like I biked last night to the library and almost ate a few somethings, but I'm just curious if that is, if they're not on, is it just because they can't be on?
Deputy Mayor Keller MP, and I just want to acknowledge, I remember when you asked about that, Councillor Hall, and at the time, I think I reflected there were very few points. There are actually quite a few, so I answered that incorrectly. But we can certainly discuss with ATCO if there's opportunities. I think that it is a matter of the actual infrastructure to the lights being damaged, and in some cases, the structures themselves. So we're going to need to work through that with ATCO. We have started an inventory of the status of the streetlights, and we can work with ATCO to refine that and bring that back to council. But it is a fact that there's just damaged infrastructure, whether that's the electrical lines leading the lights or the light structures themselves. If they're out, they just are frankly, not working due to damage.
Can I have a motion to accept the motion action list that has been amended? Councillor Wilson, all those in favor? That is carried. Calendar upcoming meetings. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much. I will be in attendance at a library board meeting this evening, our last one of the year.
Anyone else? Councillor Baxter.
I will be attending the community conversation for children and youth tomorrow afternoon.
Next one, we've upcoming events. We have the Municipal Jasper and Parks Canada Hockey Game 1:30 on December 12th at Jasper Activity Centre, and the community party on Friday, December 13th, starting at 5:30. Any other events that's happening in town? Before I call a motion to go in camera, there won't be anything coming out of that, Councillor Wilson. Therefore, I want to thank the community members and businesses and that have joined us this morning on Zoom. And we will see you all next week at 1:30 back here in Coleman. Thank you, everybody. I'd like a motion to go in camera. Councillor Hall, it is 11:14. All in favor? That is carried.